For decades, the ancient ship lay hidden beneath the sands of Vuric 7, its enormous black hull gleaming with a strange, otherworldly light that no one could understand. It had been discovered by the galaxy's most advanced races, but no matter how hard they tried, no one could bring it to life. It was said to be a weapon from an ancient civilization, a war machine that could change the tide of the galaxy's endless battles. But the ship remained silent, unmoving, as if it were nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past. The aliens who came to Vuric 7 were desperate. They knew that the ship held power beyond their wildest dreams. The war between the different alien species had raged for centuries, and they believed that this ship might be the key to victory. Scientists, engineers, and the most skilled pilots from every corner of the galaxy had attempted to launch the ship, but every effort failed. They had spent years analyzing the controls, but nothing worked. The ship refused to wake. No one understood why. In the grand chamber of the ship, dozens of aliens gathered, staring at the massive control panel. It was a complex array of buttons, lights, and alien symbols that no one could decipher. Every time a new expert arrived, they thought they would be the one to unlock the ship's secrets. But they were wrong. The ship stayed dormant. Among those gathered in the chamber was Commander Zarvik, a tall, powerful alien with a reputation for being ruthless. He was the leader of the expedition, the one who oversaw every attempt to activate the ship. His eyes glowed with frustration as another pilot stepped forward. The alien pressed a series of buttons on the console, hoping for the same result that had eluded them all for years. But once again, the ship did nothing. No hum, no movement, nothing. "This is a waste of time," Zarvik muttered to himself, his sharp voice echoing through the chamber. He turned to the gathered crowd, his anger rising. "We've tried everything. The ship is dead, and it has no intention of waking." A hushed silence fell over the group. They had all heard the rumors. The stories of an ancient prophecy that said the ship would only respond to a human. But no one believed it. Humans were weak creatures, small and insignificant compared to the mighty alien races that had gathered here. Surely, a human could not awaken such a powerful machine. But then, from the shadows of the chamber, a figure stepped forward. It was a young human boy, no older than 16. His name was Eli, and he had been brought to Vuric 7 as a slave, forced to work in the desert heat and clean the wreckage of the alien warships. His clothes were torn and dirty, his skin tanned from the harsh sun, but his eyes held a spark of curiosity that made him different from the other slaves. Eli had no idea why he was being called forward. He had never been allowed near the ship's control panels. The aliens treated him like nothing more than a tool to carry out their orders. But today, something felt different. He was pulled into the chamber by two alien guards, who roughly pushed him toward the control panel. "Clean it," one of them growled, shoving him closer to the console. "We need this place spotless." Eli hesitated, looking around at the strange, glowing controls in front of him. The symbols on the panel were unlike anything he had ever seen, but there was something about them that felt familiar. He couldn't explain it. It was as if the ship was calling to him. With trembling hands, he wiped away the dust from the surface of the control panel. His fingers brushed against the cool metal, and for a moment, nothing happened. The aliens in the room watched him, their eyes filled with disbelief. How could a human do something none of them had been able to? But then, as Eli's hand touched the surface again, something changed. The air in the room seemed to hum, as if the ship were coming to life. A soft light flickered from the console, and the ship's engines, dormant for centuries, suddenly sputtered to life. The sound was faint at first, but it grew louder, like the deep rumbling of a sleeping giant waking from its long slumber. Zarvik's eyes widened in shock. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The human boy, Eli, had done something no alien had ever been able to do. The ship was responding to him. The entire chamber fell into stunned silence. The ship's massive engines began to glow, their power slowly building. The walls of the chamber seemed to vibrate with the force of the energy being unleashed. The aliens watched in awe and fear. The ship that had refused to wake for so long had chosen to answer a human. Zarvik took a step forward, his voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. This cannot be. This ship was not meant for humans. It was designed for beings far superior to your kind. Eli stood frozen in place, his heart racing. He didn't know what was happening. His mind was spinning with questions. Why had the ship responded to him? Was he supposed to control it? And what did this mean for him? And for the galaxy? Before he could process any of it, the ship's control panel lit up with strange symbols, and a deep voice, low and resonant, echoed through the chamber. It wasn't a language any of them could understand, but Eli felt the meaning in his bones. The ship had recognized him. The aliens, including Zarvik, took a step back in fear. The ship had chosen a human, and none of them understood why. For the first time, the ship was alive, and it was waiting for Eli to make the next move. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea what he was supposed to do, but in that moment, he realized one thing. He was the one the ship had been waiting for. The room was filled with a tense silence as Eli stood frozen, his hand still resting on the glowing control panel. His heart pounded in his chest, and he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The ship's engines rumbled beneath the floor, sending vibrations through the air. The sound grew louder, more powerful. The ship was awakening, and Eli was the one who had triggered it. Zarvik, the alien commander, took a step forward, his face twisted in disbelief and anger. "What did you do?" he demanded, his voice sharp and cold. The other aliens, once proud and confident, now looked uncertain. They had never seen anything like this before. The ship had responded to Eli, a human, in a way it had never responded to any of them. Eli opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind was racing. He didn't understand what was happening. How could a simple touch from him cause the ship to come to life? He was just a slave, a nobody. Yet here he was, standing in front of the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, and it was waiting for him to make the next move. The control panel in front of him began to glow brighter, the symbols shifting and changing in patterns that seemed to dance across the surface. Eli's eyes followed the movement, mesmerized. He felt a strange pull, an invisible force guiding his actions. The ship was alive, and it wanted him to control it. Zarvik's voice broke through the tension in the room. "You, human, step away from the controls. You don't understand what you're dealing with." His tone was harsh, filled with authority, but there was a hint of fear in his eyes. The ship was no longer just a weapon. It was something much more dangerous, and it had chosen Eli. But Eli didn't move. The ship seemed to be calling to him, as if it recognized him, as if it knew something he didn't. He felt a strange connection to it, an ancient bond that he couldn't explain. It was as if the ship had been waiting for him all along, and now that he was here, it was ready to act. Zarvik's impatience grew. "I said, step away." He reached out, his hand grabbing Eli's arm, trying to pull him away from the control panel. But the moment his hand touched Eli's skin, a sudden surge of energy shot through the room. The walls flickered with light, and the air crackled with power. Zarvik was thrown back, his body slammed into the far wall with a force that made the entire chamber shake. The aliens gasped, and the slaves in the background looked on in shock. Eli, still holding his ground, felt the energy pulse through his body. It was overwhelming, almost too much to handle, but he couldn't let go. It was as if the ship's power had recognized him, chosen him, and now it was bonding with him in a way he couldn't understand. The voice from the ship echoed again, low and deep, filling the room with an almost hypnotic rhythm. The words were not in any language Eli knew, but the meaning was clear. The ship wanted him to command it. The others couldn't control it, but Eli could. He was the key. Eli's mind raced as he looked around the room at the stunned aliens. They were all watching him, some with fear in their eyes, others with greed. They wanted the ship, they wanted its power, but Eli knew something they didn't. The ship wasn't just a tool for war. It was something much more, something that could change the course of the galaxy. Eli, a soft voice whispered from behind him. It was Rena, another human slave who had been brought to Virac 7 with him. She had been his only friend in this harsh, unforgiving world. Her voice was filled with both fear and awe. "What's happening? What did you do?" Eli turned to her, his eyes wide with confusion. I don't know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ship, it's alive. It's calling to me." Rena stepped closer, her hand trembling as she reached out to him. "But why? You're just a slave. You're nothing to them," she said, glancing nervously at the alien commanders. "They'll never let you control it. They'll take it from you." Eli's eyes flickered back to the control panel, where the symbols continued to shift and glow. He could feel the ship's power coursing through him, an unstoppable force that seemed to push him forward. He had no choice now. The ship had chosen him, and he couldn't turn back. Suddenly, the ship's voice echoed louder, more urgent. The aliens in the room recoiled as the ship began to hum, its engines spinning faster. The room seemed to warp with energy, as if reality itself was bending to the will of the ship. It was clear now. The ship was not just a weapon. It was alive, and it had a purpose. Zarvik, still recovering from the blast, stood up slowly, his face a mask of fury. "No human will control this ship," he snarled. He turned to his fellow commanders. "We'll take it from him. We can't let a slave wield such power." But Eli could feel it now. The ship was not just a machine. It was a sentient being, one that had been waiting for someone like him. It wanted him to lead, to command, to use its power. And despite the fear and doubt in his heart, Eli knew that he had no choice. He had to control it, or the galaxy would be lost. With a deep breath, Eli placed his hands on the control panel once more. The ship's power surged through him, overwhelming his senses. The voice echoed again, this time clearer. "You are the chosen one. Lead." The ship's engines roared to life, and for the first time in centuries, the ship began to move. The walls of the chamber shook as the ship prepared to rise from its slumber, and Eli felt the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. The ship's massive engines hummed with power, sending waves of energy throughout the chamber. The walls of the ancient structure trembled, and the very ground beneath Eli's feet seemed to shift, as if the planet itself was responding to the awakening of the ship. His heart raced as he gripped the controls tighter. The air was thick with tension, and the sound of the ship's systems coming to life filled the room. Zarvik and the other aliens stood frozen, their eyes wide with shock and fear. They had never seen anything like this before. The ship had been dormant for centuries, refusing to respond to any of them. But now, a mere human, Eli, had activated it. The ship was alive, and it was waiting for his command. Eli's mind was a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief. How could this be happening? He had never asked for this. He was just a slave, a nobody. But the ship was waiting for him, and he could feel its power coursing through him. It wasn't just a weapon. It was something far greater, something ancient and mysterious, and somehow it had chosen him. The voice of the ship echoed in his mind, again, low and resonant, its words vibrating through his body. "You are the one. Lead." Eli didn't understand what the voice meant, but he knew one thing for certain. He was the one who held the ship's power now. The aliens around him, who had once been in control, were nothing but bystanders in the presence of this ancient force. The ship was his to command. Zarvik, still struggling to regain his composure, took a step forward. His eyes burned with fury and desperation. "No human will control this ship," he snarled. His voice was thick with anger. "The galaxy does not belong to you." Eli felt a chill run down his spine at the threat in Zarvik's voice. He could see the hatred in the alien commander's eyes. Zarvik's pride had been shattered, and he would do anything to regain control. But Eli wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The ship had chosen him, and with its power, he felt invincible. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. Eli's heart beat loudly in his chest as he stared at the alien leader. Then, without thinking, he spoke. "I command you," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that lurked beneath his calm exterior. The words left his lips like a spark in dry tinder, and the reaction was immediate. The ship responded, its systems activating with a deafening roar. The walls of the chamber lit up, casting strange shadows across the room. A low rumble echoed beneath their feet, and the ground shook as if the ship was beginning to rise. Zarvek's eyes widened, and he took a step back, his face a mask of disbelief. "What have you done?" he hissed. He was no longer speaking to Eli directly but to the ship itself, as if it could hear his every word. "You dare to follow a human. You belong to us." But the ship did not respond to Zarvek's anger. It responded to Eli's command. The massive doors of the chamber groaned and began to open, revealing the vast desert landscape outside. The ship's engines roared louder, their power shaking the ground beneath them. The chamber was no longer just a place of observation. It was the control room of a living, breathing machine. Eli didn't know what he was doing, but he could feel the ship's energy flowing through him, guiding his every move. He stepped forward, pressing his hand onto the control panel once more. The symbols on the screen shifted, the alien script shifting and rearranging as if it were responding to his touch. Launch sequence initiated, the ship's voice echoed, its deep tones reverberating through the chamber. The sound was both comforting and terrifying at once. Eli could feel the power building inside him, and with it, a sense of responsibility. He wasn't just a slave anymore. He was the leader of something far greater than himself. Outside the chamber, the sun of Virak 7 was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. The wind howled through the desolate dunes, carrying the scent of sand and dust. But in that moment, the ship was more alive than ever. It was ready to leave the planet, ready to rise into the skies and beyond. Eli's breath caught in his throat as the ship began to lift. The ground trembled beneath him, and the aliens watching from behind him gasped as they saw the ship's massive hull begin to rise off the ground. The sand beneath it shifted and swirled as the ship slowly took flight, its engines pushing it upward with increasing power. But Zarvek was not done. His fury boiled over, and in a swift movement, he lunged forward, his hands reaching for Eli. "You are nothing. The ship is mine," he roared. Before Eli could react, the ship responded. The control panel glowed brighter, and the voice echoed once more, louder than before. "Protect." In an instant, a shield of energy enveloped Eli, creating a protective barrier around him. Zarvek's hands slammed against the invisible force field, but the power of the ship's defense was too strong. He stumbled back, his body flung aside by the sheer force. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't have time to celebrate his victory. The ship was now in full motion, its engines humming with power as it soared higher and higher into the sky. The desert below seemed to grow smaller with each passing second, and Eli realized they were no longer just on Virak 7. They were leaving the planet, heading into the unknown reaches of space. The ship's immense power was at his command, but with that power came responsibility. He wasn't just a slave anymore. He was the leader of a ship that could change the galaxy. Eli knew he had to learn quickly to understand the ship's capabilities and what it wanted from him. But in that moment, all he could do was hold on and let the ship guide him, wherever it was headed. As the ship continued its ascent, Eli looked down at the alien commanders, their faces a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. They had underestimated him, and now they would see what a human could do. The ship was his, and the galaxy would never be the same again. He was no longer just a slave. He was the master of the ship, and the galaxy's fate rested in his hands. The ship soared through the sky, breaking free from the atmosphere of Virak 7. Below, the desert planet grew smaller, its endless dunes now nothing more than a distant memory. The stars above seemed to beckon to Eli, pulling him toward the unknown. The ship's power coursed through him, an energy that made him feel both invincible and vulnerable at the same time. Eli stood at the center of the control room, his hands still resting lightly on the glowing control panel. The ship hummed around him, its systems alive with purpose. He could feel it now, more than ever. The ship wasn't just a machine. It was a sentient being, as alive as any of the aliens that surrounded him. And it was waiting for him to make the next move. The aliens, once powerful and confident, were now mere passengers in this journey. Zarvik and his commanders stood at a distance, their eyes filled with fury and fear. They had underestimated Eli, and now they were paying the price. Their pride had been shattered, and they knew it. The ship, the very thing they had hoped to control, was now in the hands of a human. Zarvik, his fists clenched in frustration, took a step forward. "You think you've won, human." His voice was low and menacing, but there was a tremor in it that Eli didn't miss. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. This ship, this power, it's not for you. You're just a pawn." Eli didn't flinch. His grip on the controls tightened, and the ship responded. A pulse of energy radiated through the room, sending a shockwave that knocked Zarvik back. The alien commander's body slammed into the far wall, and he fell to the ground, gasping for air. His soldiers, standing behind him, hesitated. They had seen the power of the ship, and they were afraid. "You're wrong," Eli said quietly, his voice steady. "The ship chose me. I am its master now, and I won't let anyone take it from me." The room fell silent. Eli didn't know where his confidence came from, but he knew one thing for certain. This was his destiny. The ship was his, and he would protect it at any cost. The energy that flowed through him was more than just power. It was a connection, a bond with something far greater than himself. For the first time since his arrival on Vuric 7, Eli felt truly free. He wasn't just a slave anymore. He was in control. But as he looked around at the aliens, he realized that freedom came with a price. Zarvik and his soldiers would never let him go without a fight. And the galaxy, for all its power, would never be the same again. The ship's voice echoed through Eli's mind, deep and resonant, as if it were speaking directly to him. "The path is set. We journey to the stars." Eli's heart skipped a beat. The path? What path? He didn't understand, but he knew the ship wasn't just talking about the stars. It was talking about something more, something deeper. He had no idea what he was about to face, but the ship was guiding him, and he had no choice but to follow. He turned to the control panel and pressed a series of symbols. The ship responded immediately, its engines powering up as it shifted direction. The stars outside the viewport seemed to swirl, the ship's incredible speed taking it deeper into the galaxy. Eli looked out the window, seeing the vast expanse of space unfold before him. It was both beautiful and terrifying. "Where are we going?" Rena, who had been silent up until now, finally spoke, her voice shaky but curious. She had stood by Eli since the beginning, a silent witness to everything that had happened. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was something else there too, hope. She wasn't sure where this journey would lead, but she knew Eli wasn't the same person he had been when they first arrived on Vuric 7. "I don't know," Eli answered honestly. "But wherever it is, we're going there together." Rena nodded, but there was a shadow in her eyes. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and now they were traveling through it on the most powerful ship in existence. She knew there were forces out there that would stop at nothing to control this ship, and Eli. But for now, she trusted him. She had to. The aliens in the room, their eyes still filled with disbelief, began to murmur among themselves. They had lost control, but they weren't ready to accept it. They were still plotting, still trying to figure out how to take back what they had lost. Zarvik, now standing again, wiped the blood from his mouth and glared at Eli. "You think you've won. he repeated, this time with more venom. But the galaxy will never bow to a human. There are forces far greater than you can imagine, and they will destroy you. Eli met his gaze, unflinching. Then let them come. With those words, the ship's voice echoed in his mind once more, its tone firm and commanding. The path is set. We journey to the stars. The ship's trajectory shifted once again, moving faster and faster as it left the reaches of Vuric 7. Eli felt a surge of energy in his chest as the ship's systems reached full power. There was no turning back now. He was the master of the most powerful force in the galaxy, and he would not let anyone take that from him. As the stars around them stretched into streaks of light, Eli's mind raced. What awaited them in the unknown reaches of space? Would the ship's power be enough to protect them from the forces that hunted them? And what was the ship's true purpose? Why had it chosen him? For now, all Eli could do was hold on. The journey had only just begun, and the path ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers he couldn't even imagine. But he was ready. The ship was his, and nothing would stand in his way. The ship soared through the endless abyss of space, its engines vibrating with a low, powerful hum. Eli stood at the control panel, his fingers moving instinctively over the glowing symbols, the ship responding to his every touch. It felt like the ship was alive, its pulse syncing with his heartbeat, a strange connection that neither of them fully understood yet. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into endless ribbons of light, moving faster than Eli could process. The ship was traveling at unimaginable speeds, leaving planets, moons, and galaxies behind. It was as if the ship wasn't bound by the laws of time and space, and with each passing second, Eli could feel his mind expanding, understanding more about the vessel, its purpose, and his own place in it. Zarvik and his men were still in the control room, standing in silence, their expressions a mix of disbelief and fear. They had tried to resist, but it was clear now that the ship had chosen Eli, and nothing could change that. The alien commander had not spoken since their confrontation, his eyes locked on Eli with a look of quiet fury. Eli, however, was too absorbed in the ship's systems to pay much attention to the aliens. His mind raced with questions. What was this ship? Why had it chosen him? And what did it mean by the path is set? The ship's voice resonated in his mind again, deep and powerful. The path is clear. You will lead. Eli frowned, trying to make sense of the cryptic words. The path. Was this the path the ship had been waiting for? Was it some sort of test? He shook his head, trying to focus. There were too many questions, too much unknown. But one thing was certain. The ship was guiding him, and he had to trust it. His thoughts were interrupted when a loud alarm blared through the control room. The lights flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Eli's hand instinctively flew to the controls, but before he could make sense of the situation, a deep, menacing voice echoed throughout the ship. Warning. Intruder detected. Unknown force approaching. Eli's heart skipped a beat. Intruders. He spun around, his eyes darting toward Zarvik and the others. They looked just as confused and alarmed as he felt. What's happening? Rena asked, her voice laced with worry. She had been standing beside Eli, watching as the ship soared through space, but now her fear was evident. I don't know, Eli answered, trying to stay calm. But something's coming. Something we can't see. The ship's systems flared to life, a storm of alien symbols flashing on the screens. Eli's mind struggled to keep up with the rapid information flooding his senses. It felt like the ship was fighting against something. Something powerful, something dark. The walls of the control room trembled, and the ship jolted suddenly, throwing Eli off balance. A blinding light filled the room, followed by a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the vessel. Hold on, Eli shouted, grabbing Rena's arm to steady her as the ship lurched again, this time more violently. Zarvik and his commanders had already taken cover, their eyes wide with terror. "This is no ordinary attack," Zarvik muttered, his voice shaking. "This is a force unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's dark, evil." Hela's mind raced. He had no idea what Zarvik meant, but the ship was clearly responding to a threat. Something was out there, something that could match the ship's power. And if Zarvik was right, it was a force that neither he nor the ship could easily overcome. The ship's voice came again, this time urgent and commanding. "Protect. Warning. Dark force approaches." Eli's heart pounded. He wasn't just the ship's leader anymore. He was its protector. But against what? What could possibly threaten this ancient vessel? A sudden flash of light appeared on the horizon outside the viewport. A dark, swirling mass of energy that seemed to warp the very fabric of space around it. The stars around it bent and twisted, like the universe itself was being consumed by the dark force. Eli's breath caught in his throat. This was no ordinary enemy. Whatever it was ancient, powerful, and it was coming for them. "Prepare for battle," the ship's voice ordered. Eli's fingers hovered over the controls, his mind racing. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't a soldier, and this ship was unlike anything he had ever encountered. But the ship was counting on him. He had to make a choice. Without thinking, Eli slammed his hands down on the control panel. "Activate defenses," he commanded, his voice sharp. He had no idea what he was doing, but the ship responded immediately. The walls of the ship lit up with a fiery glow, the energy shields activating with a low hum. The dark mass outside grew larger, its presence more oppressive, and Eli could feel it in his bones. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a living, breathing force, and it was connected to something ancient, something far older than any of them. The dark force drew closer, and the ship shuddered as if in pain. The energy shields flickered, struggling to hold against the incoming threat. Eli could see the ship's internal systems working overtime, trying to combat the dark energy. But it wasn't enough. The force was overwhelming, and the ship's defenses were weakening. "Prepare for impact," the ship's voice intoned, calm yet filled with urgency. Eli's mind raced. They were outmatched, but they couldn't give up. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself to focus. "What can we do?" he muttered under his breath, his fingers dancing across the controls. The ship's voice replied, its tone now filled with a strange sense of purpose. "You must fight. You are the chosen one." Suddenly, Eli felt a surge of power rush through him, a connection between him and the ship that he had never felt before. The dark force was still coming, but now, for the first time, Eli didn't feel alone. The ship was with him, and together they would face whatever this dark force was. The ship's energy shields flared one last time, glowing bright blue as the dark mass collided with the ship's defenses. A violent explosion of light and energy erupted around them, and Eli's world turned white. Then, just as suddenly, everything went silent. The darkness had come, but now it was time for the ship and Eli to fight back. The ship shuddered violently, its once stable systems now in a state of disarray. Eli's heart raced as the blinding light from the dark force faded, leaving behind an eerie silence that hung heavily in the control room. The hum of the engines had stopped, replaced by a low, unsettling thrum that echoed through the ship. For a moment, it felt as if everything had come to a standstill. Eli gripped the control panel, his mind reeling from the violent collision. His vision was blurred, and the sounds of the ship's systems malfunctioning filled his ears. But through the chaos, he could still hear the voice of the ship, calm yet filled with an undeniable urgency. Damage critical. Shields failing. Eli's breath caught in his throat. The dark force had hit them harder than he could have imagined. The energy shields that had once been strong were now flickering, and the ship's protective barrier was nearly gone. If they didn't act quickly, they'd be vulnerable to another strike. "Zarvik," Eli shouted, turning toward the alien commander, who was struggling to stay on his feet as the ship rocked. "Do you have any weapons?" Anything that can fight this thing. Zarvik looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and fear. Weapons? He spat out the word as if it were a curse. You think we can fight that thing? It's not just a weapon. It's a force. A dark, ancient force that cannot be defeated by anything you have. Eli's eyes narrowed. He knew the aliens had never faced anything like this before, but he wasn't about to give up. Not now. The ship had chosen him for a reason. It wasn't just some random coincidence. He had to believe that there was a way out of this. There had to be. The ship's voice echoed in his mind once again. You are the key. Find the source. The words were cryptic, but Eli understood them as if they had been planted in his mind for a reason. He wasn't just the ship's leader. He was something more. The ship had trusted him with its power, and now it was urging him to find the heart of the darkness that threatened them. Without wasting another second, Eli began pressing buttons on the control panel, trying to access more information. The screens in front of him flickered, showing distorted images of the dark force outside the ship, an enormous, swirling mass of black energy, like a black hole trying to consume everything in its path. As he studied the screens, something strange began to happen. The mass of dark energy outside began to pulse, as if it were alive. It responded to the ship, to the very presence of Eli. The moment the ship's energy began to react, the dark force seemed to draw closer, its tendrils reaching out like claws. Wait, Rena called, rushing to his side. What are you doing, Eli? You're not thinking of going out there, are you? Eli glanced at her, his eyes filled with determination. I have to. I don't know what this is, but I can feel it. It's not just attacking us. It's trying to reach something, and we need to find out what it wants. Zarvik stepped forward, his alien eyes narrowed. You're mad if you think you can stop this force. It's ancient. It's beyond anything we can understand. Eli didn't respond to him. Instead, he focused on the ship's systems, tapping into the deepest parts of the vessel's core. He could feel the energy surge through his fingertips as the ship's power responded to him, as if it were preparing for something. But what? And how could he stop the darkness that seemed to know him so intimately? The ship's voice broke through his thoughts, as clear as day. To stop it, you must go to the heart. The source of the darkness lies within you. Eli's heart skipped a beat. Within me. The voice did not explain further, but something deep inside Eli clicked. The connection between him and the ship had always been more than physical. There was something else, something more profound that he had yet to comprehend. He had never truly understood the extent of the ship's power, but now it seemed that he was the key to unlocking it. Activate the core, the ship commanded. Eli's fingers moved on instinct, his body acting before his mind could process the order. The control panel in front of him opened up, revealing a hidden compartment that pulsed with a soft, blue light. The ship's heart, its core, lay before him. A dark energy, just like the force outside, swirled within it. But this energy was different. It wasn't dark. It was ancient, wise, and full of potential. Eli, Rena said, her voice trembling with fear. What's happening? I don't know, he replied, his voice shaking. But I think this is the source. Whatever is coming after us, it's linked to this. As he reached out toward the core, his hand hovering above it, a sudden flash of pain shot through his chest. It wasn't physical pain, but something deeper, something emotional, as if the ship itself were trying to communicate something to him. Images flooded his mind. Vivid flashes of distant stars, ancient beings, and cataclysmic events. A battle that had torn apart galaxies. And then a face, an ancient face, with eyes filled with both wisdom and sorrow. It was the face of someone who had once lived in the heart of the ship, someone who had tried to harness its power. The images stopped as suddenly as they had come, and Eli felt an overwhelming sense of realization. He wasn't just a passenger on this ship. He was its final hope, the one who could either save it or destroy everything it represented. The darkness, the dark force, had come because it recognized him. It knew he was connected to the ship's heart. He took a deep breath, focusing all his thoughts on the core. The ship's power surged through him, filling him with a sense of purpose. If he didn't act now, the darkness would consume them all. Eli pressed his hand firmly against the core. And then everything went black. Eli's mind was blank, and for a moment, he felt nothing but an overwhelming sense of weightlessness. There was no sound, no light, just a vast, suffocating void that stretched endlessly in all directions. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, a loud and frantic rhythm that seemed to be the only thing tethering him to existence. Then, the darkness began to shift. It was as if the universe itself was responding to him. A presence, not physical but intangible, swirled around him. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it. The same darkness that had threatened to consume them all. It was everywhere, closing in, pulling at him, testing him. But this time, it wasn't just an enemy. It was a part of him. Images flashed before his eyes. Memories of the ship, of the battles it had fought, of the civilizations it had encountered. Eli understood now. The ship wasn't just a vessel. It was a part of something ancient, something that spanned across the universe itself. The darkness that had attacked them was its opposite, a force that had always existed to maintain balance, a force that had recognized him as its equal. A voice, deep and resonant, echoed in his mind, the same voice that had guided him from the beginning. You are the chosen one. The ship is yours, but the darkness is within you. The heart of the ship is the heart of the universe. To control it is to control the balance of all things, but in your hands, that power can either heal or destroy. Eli's chest tightened. He understood now. This was the ultimate test. The ship had chosen him because he was the only one who could make the decision, to use its power to save the universe, or to let it fall into chaos. The dark force pressed closer, an ominous force that seemed to be pulling him down, drowning him in its shadow. But there was another feeling, too, one of light, of energy, of creation. It was the heart of the ship, calling to him, urging him to take control, to use its power for good. I can't do this alone, Eli whispered, his voice barely audible in the vast emptiness. And then, as if the ship had heard him, a rush of warmth and energy surged through him. It filled him completely, and for the first time since this journey had begun, Eli felt truly alive. He wasn't just connected to the ship anymore. He was the ship, and the ship was him. The ship's voice returned, now softer, more personal. You have always been one with us. We are bound by the same force, the same will. Together, we can restore balance. Eli's mind raced, torn between the two forces, the darkness and the light. The dark force wanted to consume everything, to tear apart the fabric of the universe itself. But the ship's energy, its ancient power, offered a chance for creation, for rebuilding what had been lost. But there was something else. The darkness wasn't just a force of destruction. It was a reflection of the choices Eli would make. The balance was delicate. If he embraced the power of the ship, if he chose to control the darkness, he could reshape the future. But that kind of power came with a price. Choose, the voice urged. You are the one who will decide. Eli's mind spun, but he knew what he had to do. He couldn't destroy the darkness. He couldn't let it consume everything. But he couldn't ignore it either. The darkness was part of him, and in embracing it, he would find the key to maintaining the balance. With a deep breath, Eli focused on the ship's core once more, calling upon the power that surged through him. He didn't fight the darkness. Instead, he welcomed it, accepting its presence as part of the grand design. He allowed it to merge with the light, to become one with the ship's heart. The ship trembled beneath him, its systems flickering as the two forces collided. The darkness and the light, creation and destruction. Both were essential. Both were needed to maintain the balance. For a brief moment, Eli felt as though the entire universe was watching, waiting for his decision. And then, with a final surge of energy, the ship's heart pulsed, once, twice, and then it stabilized. The ship groaned, but it was no longer in pain. The balance had been restored. Eli opened his eyes, blinking as the control room came back into focus. The dark force had vanished, dissipated into the void like smoke in the wind. The ship was calm, its systems stable once again. Reyna was standing beside him, her eyes wide with disbelief. You did it, Eli. You stopped it." Eli nodded slowly, still trying to process what had just happened. He had done it, but at what cost? The power of the ship was now his to wield, and with it, the responsibility to maintain that balance. It wasn't just the universe that depended on him anymore. It was everything, every life, every star, every force that existed in this vast, uncharted expanse. Zarvik and his men stood in stunned silence, still processing the impossible reality before them. They had witnessed the impossible, and now they were unsure whether to praise him or fear him. Eli had become something more than just a leader. He had become the keeper of balance. The ship's voice echoed in his mind once again, but this time it was filled with approval. "You have done well, Eli. You have chosen wisely." And for the first time since the journey began, Eli felt at peace. The darkness had not defeated him, nor had it consumed him. He had found a way to coexist with it. Together, they were stronger. Together, they would protect the universe. The ship had chosen him, and now it was time for him to lead it into the future. The stars outside the viewport shimmered, brighter than ever before. And with that, Eli knew that his journey had only just begun.